Okay, so picture this. You get off the plane in Cairo, turn on your phone, and bam, you're connected to a local network like magic. No SIM card needed.
Yeah, that's the big promise of eSIM, right?
It is, but is Egypt really ready to ditch the plastic and go all in on this digital SIM revolution?
You know, it's a big question and a timely one too, because Egypt's got these big plans to become like a major digital hub in the region.
Yeah, all those smart city projects they've been talking about.
Exactly. And eSIM is a key part of that whole vision.
I can see how it would fit in. Like I was reading about how they want to use eSIM in traffic sensors to help manage Cairo's, shall we say, legendary traffic.
Yeah, good luck with that one.
Right? But hey, anything that could even make a dent in that traffic is worth looking into.
Absolutely.
So for this deep dive, we're going to try and like cut through the hype and really get into the nitty gritty of eSIM in Egypt. You know, the potential, the challenges, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. No sugarcoating here. We're going to lay it all out. You know, why some folks are saying eSIM is the future and why others are pumping the brakes, especially here in Egypt.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's make sure everyone's on the same page.
Sure.
What exactly is eSIM?
In the simplest terms, it's basically a tiny little chip that's already built into your phone.
Okay.
And it does the same job as a regular SIM card, you know, lets you connect to a mobile network, but without needing that physical card.
So like a digital SIM card.
Exactly.
Okay, so I can see the appeal. Like imagine you're traveling and you land in a new country. Instead of hunting down a SIM card at the airport, you just, I don't know, go into your phone settings and boom, you're on a local network.
Yeah, no more fumbling with those tiny little SIM cards trying not to lose them. I mean, I always lose those things.
Oh, tell me about it. Constantly misplacing them.
So it's great for consumers, and it's also a huge win for the telecom companies.
How so?
Well, they can save a ton of money because they don't have to manufacture and distribute all those physical SIM cards anymore.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Less plastic, less waste. Exactly. It's more efficient and it's better for the environment.
So it sounds like a win-win, right? Egypt gets to join the digital fast lane, telecom companies get to streamline their operations, and we get rid of those pesky little SIM cards.
Yeah, on the surface, it sounds pretty great.
But I'm sensing but coming here?
Well, you're right. There's always but this is where things get really interesting because while the potential for eSIM in Egypt is definitely, there are some very real hurdles to overcome.
Okay. I'm all ears, lay it on us. What are we missing here?
Well, for starters, we got to remember that a lot of people in Egypt might not even be able to use eSIM.
Right.
Not everyone has the latest smartphone. You know, a lot of people are still using older models that don't support this technology.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the cool new tech and forget that not everyone has access to it.
Exactly. And even if everyone magically had a brand new eSIM compatible phone, there's the whole issue of the digital divide. Okay, so we're talking about people who maybe aren't as comfortable with technology or who don't have reliable internet access.
Exactly. Can you imagine asking someone who's used to just popping down to the corner store to buy a SIM card to suddenly figure out this whole digital process?
Yeah. That's a big ask for some people.
It is, and it raises this question, you know, is this technology actually going to widen the gap between those who have access to the latest tech and those who don't?
Right. It's supposed to be about progress,
yeah,
but it could actually end up leaving some people further behind.
Exactly. And then there's the whole culture around SIM cards in Egypt.
What do you mean?
Well, think about all those little shops and kiosks that sell SIM cards and help people activate them.
Yeah.
That's a whole ecosystem that's built around physical SIM cards. So if everyone switches to eSIM, what happens to those businesses?
Wow, I hadn't even considered that. But yeah, you're right. That could be a real problem.
And then, of course, there's the security question. You know, eSIM profiles are digital, which means they're potentially vulnerable to hacking and cyber attacks.
So while we're busy ditching the plastic, we might be opening ourselves up to a whole new set of risks.
It's a trade-off, and it's one that we need to consider carefully.
It's fascinating how something that seems so simple on the surface can have all these complex implications.
Yeah, it's never just about the technology itself. It's about how that technology interacts with society and the economy and the culture of a place.
Well said. So we've talked about some of the downsides of eSIM, but I'm still curious, like how big of a deal are these drawbacks really?
Yeah.
Are we talking about like minor inconveniences or major roadblocks to eSIM actually taking off in Egypt?
It's a good question, and I think the answer is it depends.
On what?
Well, on a lot of things, really.
Sure.
But let's start with cost, for example.
Right.
You know, a lot of people in Egypt simply can't afford to buy a new phone just to get eSIM.
Right, especially with prices going up the way they are.
Exactly. So for a big chunk of the population, eSIM is basically out of reach from the start.
So it's almost like creating a two-tiered system.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those who can afford the fancy new tech and those who can't.
It's a valid concern, and it's something that policymakers need to think about very carefully.
Yeah, because the whole idea is to make things better for everyone, not just a select few.
Exactly. And it's not just about the initial cost of the phone either.
What else is there?
Well, you got to think about data charges too.
Oh, yeah.
If you're using eSIM to manage multiple profiles, you're probably going to need a more robust data plan.
Which means you're going to end up paying more.
Right.
Yeah.
So those hidden costs can add up pretty quickly.
Especially if you're on a tight budget.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the whole issue of the digital divide, you know.
Okay.
Even if we could magically make eSIM compatible phones affordable for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
there's still the challenge of digital literacy.
Like people knowing how to actually use the technology.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And a lot of people in Egypt, especially in rural areas, might not have the skills or the confidence to navigate all the digital steps involved in setting up and managing eSIM.
So you could end up with a situation where people have the technology, but they don't know how to use it properly.
Yeah, or even worse, they could become more vulnerable to scams and you know, online fraud.
Right, because they're not as familiar with how all this digital stuff works.
That's why education is so important.
Yeah.
If eSIM is going to be a success in Egypt, there needs to be a real effort to bridge the digital divide and help people feel confident and comfortable using this technology.
So it sounds like it's not just about rolling out the technology, it's about creating a whole ecosystem of support and education around it.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say for argument's sake that all of those challenges are addressed.
Okay.
Cost isn't a barrier anymore.
Yeah.
Digital literacy improves, and we have all these great support systems in place.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a world where eSIM actually becomes mainstream in Egypt?
I think there is, yeah.
Really?
Despite all the challenges we've talked about, eSIM has the potential to be a real game changer for certain sectors in Egypt.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, think about tourism, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Egypt is a huge tourist destination, and eSIM could make it super easy for visitors to stay connected without having to worry about buying local SIM cards.
Yeah, that makes sense. It'd be a much smoother experience.
Exactly, and it would be good for the tourism industry, too.
Right?
And then there's the whole Internet of Things thing that we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah, with all the smart devices and sensors.
Exactly. eSIM is essential for connecting all that stuff.
And with Egypt's focus on developing smart cities, eSIM could play a huge role in managing all sorts of things.
Absolutely. Things like traffic flow and energy consumption, even waste management.
Wow, it really could touch on so many different aspects of life.
And businesses could benefit too. You know, eSIM can help streamline operations and improve logistics and make it easier for employees to stay connected, especially if they travel a lot.
So even though eSIM might not be the perfect solution for everyone in Egypt right now, it has the potential to drive innovation and efficiency in certain sectors.
Exactly.
And create new opportunities for businesses and for tech-savvy individuals.
That's the key, though, you know, making sure those benefits are accessible to everyone, not just a select few.
Right. It's about creating a more inclusive digital future.
Exactly.
So it's like we've been saying this whole time. It's complicated.
Yeah.
I mean, eSIM has this huge potential to change things for the better in Egypt. But there are also all these real concerns that we can't just ignore.
Yeah, it's a classic case of technology not existing in a vacuum, right? It always interacts with the social and economic and cultural realities of a place.
And Egypt is definitely a place with a lot of those realities.
Yeah, it's a complex and constantly changing landscape.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I guess the big question is like, what's the takeaway here?
Yeah.
What do we want our listeners to walk away thinking about?
I think the main thing to remember is that the future of eSIM in Egypt is still up in the air.
Okay.
It's not a simple yes or no answer.
Right.
It's a process. You know, there are going to be twists and turns along the way, and the final outcome is going to depend on a lot of different factors.
Like what?
Well, like we've been talking about, you know, government policies and industry initiatives and technological advancements and even just consumer behavior.
So instead of asking if eSIM is going to succeed in Egypt, Maybe the better question is how it's going to evolve
Exactly.
and what role it's going to play in shaping the country's digital future.
Yeah. And that's a question that each of us can play a part in answering, you know?
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. Would you personally switch to eSIM, given everything we've talked about today, the benefits and the drawbacks?
That's a good question.
Yeah, what factors would influence your decision?
I mean, it makes you realize that technology isn't just something that happens to us.
Right, yeah.
It's something that we actively shape through our choices.
Exactly. And those choices collectively are going to determine whether eSIM becomes a force for good in Egypt or whether it ends up, you know, making existing inequalities even worse.
It's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
So to all our listeners out there, I guess the challenge is to really think about how you fit into this whole eSIM equation.
Yeah.
Would it make your life easier or more complicated?
Mm-hmm.
Would it empower you or would it leave you feeling left behind?
And remember, technology is always changing. What seems like a crazy idea today could be totally normal tomorrow.
Yeah, good point.
So stay informed, keep your eyes open, and make those tech choices carefully.
Well said. Well, that's about all the time we have for today.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of eSIM in Egypt.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you learned something new and that you'll keep thinking about this stuff even after the episode is over.
Absolutely.
Until next time. Okay.